Before we go any further, I need you to pay close attention because what is approaching on June 24th carries a weight that is very different from the countless astrological events that pass through the sky each year. This is not one of those fleeting alignments that briefly captures attention and then fades into the background. What we are looking at feels far more significant. In fact, the deeper I have gone into the charts, the more impossible it has become to ignore the pattern emerging beneath the surface. For weeks, I have been tracing the connections, examining the planetary movements, comparing cycles, and searching for anything that might challenge what I was seeing. Instead, every layer of analysis kept leading me back to the same conclusion. Something extraordinary is reaching a point of activation, and that moment arrives on June 24th. Yet what truly changed my perspective was realizing that this date does not mark the beginning of the story. It marks the moment when a process that has already been unfolding finally reveals itself. The door opens tomorrow, but the hallway leading to that door has been forming for days. If you have felt unusually reflective, emotionally unsettled, strangely aware of subtle shifts happening around you, or if it seems as though parts of your life are quietly moving into new positions without any obvious explanation, there is a reason. Beneath the visible world, a larger reorganization has already been underway, and understanding that process is essential if you want to understand the significance of what comes next. Before we can talk about the portal opening on June 24th, we have to return to what happened on June 19th and June 20th. Those dates matter far more than most people realize. In many ways, they laid the foundation for everything that follows. If you overlook those shifts, then the intensity of what is arriving may feel confusing. You may experience the effects without recognizing where they originated. That is why we need to start there. Think back over the last several days. Maybe you noticed yourself craving a slower pace. Maybe your attention drifted away from endless goals and obligations and towards something much simpler. Perhaps you suddenly wanted more sleep, more quiet, more presence, more connection to your physical environment. Maybe you found yourself longing for real food, real conversations, real experiences that could be felt rather than merely thought about. If any of that sounds familiar, do not dismiss it as coincidence. There is a deeper astrological story unfolding underneath those urges. In fact, I would argue that many of you have already sensed the shift, even if you cannot fully describe it. Sometimes change does not announce itself with noise. Sometimes it arrives like a subtle movement beneath the floorboards of your life. Nothing appears dramatically different on the outside, yet internally something feels altered. It is as though an invisible question has emerged from the depths and quietly taken a seat inside your awareness. You cannot stop thinking about it, even if you cannot yet explain why. Around June 19th, that sensation became much stronger, and the reason can be traced directly to a major astrological transition. On June 19th, Chiron, the minor planet associated with our deepest wounds and our greatest potential for healing, completed a chapter that had lasted for more than 8 years. After spending over 8 years in Aries, Chiron entered Taurus. At first glance, this may seem like a technical shift, but I believe its long-term significance cannot be overstated. Years from now, many people may look back at this period and recognize it as a turning point they did not fully appreciate while it was happening. During its long journey through Aries, Chiron illuminated wounds connected to identity. It exposed struggles surrounding selfhood, independence, survival, and the exhausting effort required to defend one's existence. For more than 8 years, many people have carried an invisible burden. They have fought to be seen, fought to be heard, fought to justify their needs, fought to claim space in environments that often demanded constant proof of worth. That energy can create resilience, but it can also create profound exhaustion. If you have recently felt a weariness that seems deeper than ordinary fatigue, if you have reached a point where you no longer want to battle for every inch of progress, there is a possibility that what you are feeling reflects the completion of this Aries chapter. The warrior inside you has been standing guard for a very long time. Now the landscape is changing. Chiron's movement into Taurus shifts the focus entirely. Taurus belongs to the realm of Earth. It governs the body, physical existence, resources, stability, comfort, security, and the deeply personal relationship we have with value. Not just financial value, but self-value. The question is no longer whether you can fight for your place in the world. The question becomes whether you believe you deserve peace once you arrive there. This is where the transit becomes intensely personal. Many people are about to confront beliefs they have been carrying for years without consciously recognizing them. Hidden beneath ambition, productivity, achievement, and constant striving often exists a quiet assumption, the assumption that rest must be earned, the assumption that worth is measured through output, the assumption that being enough depends on accomplishing more. Taurus has very little interest in those stories. Chiron entering this sign begins revealing the pain hidden underneath them. It asks uncomfortable questions. Why do you believe exhaustion is proof of value? Why do you feel guilty when you slow down? Why does receiving sometimes feel harder than struggling? Why have you learned to trust effort more than ease? As these questions rise to the surface, they may dismantle old patterns that have shaped your life for years. Yet the process is not cruel. It is deeply compassionate. It simply refuses to allow wounds built around self-worth to remain invisible any longer. What makes this transit especially unique is that it does not operate primarily through thought. Many healing journeys begin in the mind. This one begins in the body. Taurus speaks through sensation, through instinct, through physical experience, through the wisdom that exists beneath language. That is why so many people have recently felt drawn towards slower rhythms. If you have wanted to spend time outdoors, if you have felt called to prepare nourishing meals, if you have found yourself craving rest, stillness, touch, comfort, or a stronger connection to the natural world, do not assume you are losing momentum. Do not assume you are falling behind. Something far more important may be occurring. Your body may be attempting to guide you toward a form of healing your mind cannot achieve alone. The impulse to slow down is not weakness. The desire to reconnect with physical reality is not laziness. It may actually be the first sign that this new Chiron cycle has already begun reshaping your priorities. For years you may have measured your value through effort. Now life is preparing to teach a different lesson. Your body matters, your peace matters, your ability to feel safe matters. And the reason all of this is so important right now is because none of it exists separately from what arrives on June 24th. In fact, I believe these events are connected with extraordinary precision. It is almost as though the universe intentionally prepared the ground before opening the next doorway. Before destiny could move forward, something inside you needed to remember what genuine stability feels like. Before the next chapter could begin, the foundation had to shift. And that realization leads directly into what happens next. What many people fail to realize is that destiny rarely arrives when we are gripping life as tightly as possible. It does not emerge through constant tension, endless calculation, or the exhausting attempt to manage every possible outcome before it unfolds. There comes a point in every transformation where holding on becomes the very thing preventing forward movement. That is why the shift initiated by Chiron's entrance into Taurus matters so profoundly. Before any meaningful alignment can occur, the part of you that has been living in survival mode must begin to feel safe enough to loosen its grip. A nervous system trapped in vigilance cannot recognize opportunity because it is too busy scanning for danger. A heart consumed by protection cannot receive what is trying to reach it because it remains occupied with defending itself from what has already passed. This is why the recent focus on the body, on rest, on stability, on reconnecting with the physical world is not separate from the larger story. It is preparation. It is the universe strengthening the foundation before asking you to step onto entirely new ground. Imagine trying to walk through an open doorway while still clutching the walls behind you. Eventually, something has to give. Chiron in Taurus appears to be guiding people back into a sense of internal steadiness so that the next wave of change does not overwhelm them. Yet almost immediately after that grounding influence arrived, something very different occurred. If June 19th represented stabilization, then June 20th represented disruption. If one day invited you to reconnect with your center, the next challenged everything that had been standing in the way of your future. And if the last couple of days have felt unusually intense, confusing, or emotionally charged, there is a strong astrological reason why. On June 20th, Uranus formed an exact square to the lunar nodes. In astrology, this is not considered a minor event. Uranus is often associated with awakening, disruption, breakthrough, sudden revelations, and unexpected changes that permanently alter direction. It is the force that interrupts routines, challenges assumptions, and refuses to allow stagnation to continue indefinitely. When Uranus creates an exact square to the lunar nodes, the effect can feel like arriving at a crossroads that cannot be ignored. The old road begins collapsing behind you while the new road demands attention, whether you feel ready or not. What makes this particular event especially significant is the sign through which Uranus is currently moving. Uranus is in Gemini, which means the catalyst for change emerged through information, communication, perception, ideas, conversations, and moments of realization. For many people, the shift may not have looked dramatic from the outside. There may not have been fireworks or visible upheaval. Instead, something clicked internally. A piece of information landed differently. A conversation revealed something impossible to unsee. A truth surfaced that instantly changed how a situation was understood. Perhaps someone said something that completely altered your perspective. Perhaps a hidden pattern became obvious. Perhaps you suddenly recognized that a plan you had been depending on no longer reflected who you were becoming. In some cases, it may have involved relationships. In others, career decisions, personal goals, spiritual beliefs, or long-held assumptions about the future. Whatever form it took, the common thread was revelation. Something became visible that could not return to invisibility. And if that experience left you feeling unsettled, it is important to understand the deeper purpose behind it. Many people instinctively interpret disruption as punishment. When life becomes unpredictable, the mind often searches for mistakes. It asks what went wrong. It looks for reasons to blame itself. Yet from an astrological perspective, this particular Uranian activation appears to serve a very different function. Rather than punishment, it resembles preparation. Rather than destruction for its own sake, it resembles a clearing process to understand why we have to look at the lunar nodes themselves. At this moment, the nodal axis stretches between Pisces and Virgo. The south node remains in Virgo, while the north node occupies Pisces. The south node symbolizes familiar territory, inherited patterns, conditioned responses, and the habits we automatically return to when seeking security. Virgo, in its lower expression, seeks safety through analysis. It wants certainty before action. It prefers plans, systems, explanations, and detailed preparation. It attempts to reduce uncertainty by organizing reality into something manageable. Many people have spent years relying on this approach. If they can think long enough, prepare thoroughly enough, analyze carefully enough, perhaps they can avoid mistakes and maintain control. Yet the North Node in Pisces points in a very different direction. Pisces asks for trust. It asks for surrender. It asks you to move forward even when every answer has not yet appeared. It invites connection with intuition, faith, imagination, and unseen guidance. The challenge is that these two energies often feel incompatible. One wants proof, the other wants belief. One wants certainty, the other requires openness. This is precisely where Uranus entered the picture on June 20th. Through its exact square to the nodes, Uranus disrupted the structures that were keeping people attached to outdated forms of security. It challenged the illusion that every variable can be controlled. It exposed weaknesses in systems that once felt dependable. It interrupted predictable patterns and demanded a different response. For some, this may have felt like chaos. For others, it may have felt like disappointment, confusion, or instability. Yet beneath those experiences, a deeper purpose was unfolding. The old Virgo strategy of controlling every outcome was being pushed beyond its limits, not because control is inherently wrong, but because the next stage of growth requires something different. The doorway opening on June 24th cannot be entered through overthinking alone. It requires emotional trust. It requires intuitive movement. It requires the willingness to step toward something meaningful before every detail is guaranteed. As uncomfortable as the recent disruptions may have felt, they appear to have been clearing away the barriers that prevented that movement. In many ways, Uranus was removing the obstacles standing directly in front of the path. If recent events left you feeling as though the ground shifted unexpectedly, consider the possibility that what was removed was never meant to accompany you into the next chapter. Sometimes uncertainty is not evidence that everything is falling apart. Sometimes it is evidence that everything's rearranging itself into a more authentic form, and that brings us directly to the event at the center of this entire sequence, the moment toward which all of these shifts seem to be pointing. The alignment arriving on June 24th. This is where the story reaches its most remarkable turning point. On June 24th, the Sun, traveling through the early degrees of Cancer, forms a perfect trine to the North Node in Pisces. In astrological language, a trine represents harmony, ease, flow, and natural cooperation between energies. Unlike aspects that create friction or pressure, a trine allows movement without resistance. It opens channels. It creates pathways. It encourages progress that feels surprisingly effortless compared to what came before. The Sun represents the conscious self. It symbolizes identity, vitality, purpose, presence, and the essence of who you are. The North Node represents the future direction of the soul, the evolutionary path unfolding ahead, the experiences that support long-term growth and fulfillment. When these 2 points connect through a perfect trine, something extraordinary becomes possible. The person you are and the direction you are meant to move toward begin operating in harmony rather than conflict. This is why the alignment feels so significant. It resembles a moment of recognition, a moment when inner truth and future potential suddenly speak the same language. This is the reason I describe it as a cosmic affirmation, not because every challenge instantly disappears, but because the alignment itself suggests that you do not need to become someone else before moving forward. You do not need to eliminate every fear, solve every uncertainty, or perfect every aspect of yourself before the next chapter begins. The message carried within this trine is remarkably simple and deeply powerful. The version of you that exists today is already capable of taking the next step. The emotional complexity you carry does not disqualify you. The questions you still have do not disqualify you. The vulnerability you sometimes hide does not disqualify you. Instead, those very qualities may be part of what guides you toward your destination. What intensifies this energy even further is the elemental nature of the signs involved. Cancer and Pisces are both water signs. Water does not move through logic alone. Water responds to feeling. It follows intuition. It understands what cannot always be explained through words. This means the alignment unfolding on June 24th is not primarily mental. It is not about creating the perfect strategy. It is not about constructing an airtight plan. It is about recognizing a deeper knowing that already exists beneath the surface of conscious thought. And as we move deeper into this portal, that distinction becomes incredibly important. The most powerful guidance rarely arrives through endless calculations. It does not emerge from collecting more evidence, building more spreadsheets, or waiting until every possible variable has been accounted for. There comes a moment when information reaches its limit and something deeper must take over. That is the invitation carried by the North Node in Pisces throughout this cycle. The lesson has never been about abandoning intelligence. It has been about recognizing that wisdom and logic are not always the same thing. Logic once guarantees. Wisdom often moves before guarantees exist. Logic asks for proof before trust. Wisdom sometimes asks for trust before proof appears. This year has been teaching many people how to loosen their attachment to constant analysis and begin listening to the quieter guidance that exists underneath the noise of the rational mind. That guidance does not usually shout. It arrives as a feeling, a subtle certainty, a gentle pull that persists long after the mind has finished arguing with it. And when the Sun forms its exact trine to the North Node on June 24th, it illuminates that very pathway. It is as though a spotlight suddenly shines on the road your deeper self has been trying to show you all along. The message carried by this alignment feels remarkably direct. Stop waiting for complete certainty. Stop assuming you need more information before taking the next step. Stop believing that clarity only comes after every question is answered. There are moments when life asks you to trust what your soul already knows. For many people, that process may have already begun. Perhaps you've noticed an unusual sense of inner conviction emerging over the past several days. Maybe a decision that once felt impossible has quietly settled inside you, not because you solved it intellectually, but because something deeper reached a conclusion before your conscious mind caught up. You may find yourself unable to explain your certainty to other people. You may struggle to provide logical reasons, yet the knowing remains. It sits beneath the surface with surprising stability. If that sounds familiar, then it is entirely possible that you are already feeling the effects of this approaching alignment. The transit itself does not create the knowing. It amplifies what has already been awakening within you. Yet as significant as the Sun and North Node connection is, the story becomes even more remarkable when another piece of the astrological picture comes into view. In fact, this was the moment that transformed the entire chart from interesting to extraordinary. As I continued mapping the events surrounding June 24th, one detail immediately stood out. Only hours before the exact Sun and North Node trine perfects, the Moon enters Scorpio. At first glance, that may seem like a small detail. It is not. As the Moon moves through the early degrees of Scorpio, it forms its own trine to the Sun in Cancer, and another trine to the North Node in Pisces. Suddenly, three major points become connected. The Sun in Cancer, the North Node in Pisces, the Moon in Scorpio, all occupying water signs, all linked through harmonious trines, all forming a perfect triangular structure across the sky. In astrology, this configuration is known as a grand water trine, and it is an exceptionally powerful energetic pattern. To understand why it matters, imagine three rivers flowing into one another without obstruction. Each current strengthens the others. Energy circulates freely. Information moves effortlessly. Emotional awareness deepens. Intuition becomes amplified. What emerges is not a single influence, but a complete system operating in harmony. Each sign contributes something essential to the larger picture. Cancer carries the energy of emotional truth, personal vulnerability, inner security, and the instinctive desire to protect what matters most. It governs the heart's deepest needs and the places within us that seek belonging and emotional safety. Pisces contributes spiritual awareness, faith, surrender, imagination, and connection to something larger than individual identity. It represents the invisible current guiding the soul toward its future. Scorpio brings depth, transformation, courage, emotional honesty, and the willingness to confront realities that others prefer to avoid. Scorpio does not turn away from complexity. It moves directly toward it. It seeks truth beneath appearances and understands that genuine transformation requires complete honesty. When these three forces connect through a grand water trine, the result is extraordinary emotional and intuitive intensity. It creates an environment where insight can emerge from unexpected places. Feelings become messages. Dreams become meaningful. Synchronicities become easier to recognize. Internal guidance becomes louder. It is almost as if a hidden river begins flowing through every area of life simultaneously. Emotion feeds intuition. Intuition feeds purpose. Purpose feeds transformation. Transformation deepens emotional awareness. The cycle continues, strengthening itself with each turn. And during this process, you are not observing from the sidelines. You are standing inside the current itself. Yet there is something important to understand about grand trines. Despite their beauty, they are not automatically productive. In fact, their greatest strength can sometimes become their greatest weakness. Because the energy flows so smoothly, people can mistake movement for progress. They can become comfortable inside the feeling without translating that feeling into action. They can enjoy the inspiration without making the choice it calls for. Water naturally moves around obstacles. It seeks ease. It follows the path of least resistance. This means a grand water trine can create profound emotional experiences while simultaneously tempting people to remain passive. It can produce incredible insights that never become real-world decisions. It can reveal opportunities that are never acted upon. It can open doors that remain untouched simply because stepping through them requires courage. This is precisely why the Moon's presence in Scorpio matters so much. Scorpio changes the entire dynamic. Scorpio refuses superficial engagement. It refuses emotional tourism. It refuses the habit of visiting truth without allowing truth to change anything. While other water signs may drift with the current, Scorpio descends into the depths of it. Scorpio wants commitment. It wants honesty. It wants transformation that produces tangible results. Under Scorpio's influence, the invitation is not merely to feel destiny. The invitation is to participate in it, not merely to recognize truth, but to act on it, not merely to sense alignment, but to embody it. This is why I believe the portal opening on June 24th extends beyond emotional comfort or pleasant spiritual experiences. The energy feels much more demanding than that. It resembles a moment of profound personal accountability, a moment when you are asked to examine the gap between what you know and what you are willing to do about it. The question is no longer whether intuition exists. The question becomes whether you trust it enough to follow it. The question is no longer whether your soul is guiding you. The question becomes whether you are prepared to move when guidance arrives. Because the alignment itself cannot make choices for you. It can illuminate pathways. It can amplify awareness. It can create extraordinary opportunities for recognition. But eventually, a response is required. The universe may extend an invitation, yet you still have to accept it. The current may begin flowing, but you still have to step into the water. That is why this period feels so significant. It is not simply about receiving confirmation. It is about becoming an active participant in your own evolution. And when we bring all of this down into everyday life, the effects may appear in surprisingly practical ways. Around June 24th, many people may notice a sudden resolution regarding a situation that has consumed their attention for weeks or even months. A decision that felt endlessly complicated may become astonishingly simple. The mental debate may suddenly stop, not because every question has been answered, but because a deeper certainty emerges that makes additional analysis unnecessary. Others may encounter people, conversations, or opportunities that appear at precisely the right moment. These encounters may feel strangely familiar, almost as if they were anticipated long before they arrived. There may be an immediate sense of recognition that is difficult to explain logically. Something inside responds before the conscious mind has time to evaluate. For some, the experience may arrive as an emotional wave unlike anything they expected. Not fear, not sadness, not anxiety, something far deeper. A profound sense of rightness, a feeling of standing exactly where they are supposed to stand, even if external circumstances have not yet changed, even if nothing visible appears different. Even if the future remains uncertain. Internally, something settles into place, a shift occurs beneath the surface. And once that shift happens, it becomes very difficult to return to who you were before. That realization is perhaps the most important part of this entire portal, and it leads directly into what comes next. Here is the rewritten continuation. One of the biggest misunderstandings people have about moments like this is the belief that destiny arrives, demanding dramatic action. Many assume that when a powerful astrological gateway appears, it must immediately be followed by a radical decision, a sudden ending, a shocking announcement, or a complete reinvention of life overnight. Yet that is not what this alignment is asking for. The energy surrounding June 24th is not insisting that you abandon everything familiar by sunrise. It is not requiring you to make irreversible choices before you feel prepared. Instead, what this portal seems designed to do is far simpler and far more profound. It reveals direction. It illuminates a pathway that may have been hidden beneath confusion, fear, distraction, or overthinking. Once that pathway becomes visible, your responsibility is not to sprint toward the finish line. Your responsibility is simply to acknowledge what you see, to honor it, to trust it enough to take the next available step, no matter how small that step may appear from the outside. That distinction matters because genuine transformation rarely happens through one dramatic leap. More often, it begins with a quiet decision to move in alignment with something that feels true. Will every person experience a life-changing revelation on June 24th? No one can honestly guarantee that. Astrology describes possibilities, not certainties. Yet what can be said is that the energetic conditions supporting breakthrough, clarity, recognition, and alignment are undeniably present. The doorway exists, the current exists, the invitation exists. Whether or not an individual chooses to engage with that invitation depends largely on their willingness to trust inner guidance instead of demanding external proof before every movement forward. Those who remain open may later look back and realize that what seemed like an ordinary day was actually the beginning of an entirely different chapter. But there is another piece of this story that deserves attention because it is often overlooked. People love discussing the moment a portal opens. Far fewer people talk about what happens after. Yet integration is where the real work begins. Receiving insight is one thing. Building a life around that insight is something entirely different. This is why the astrology of June 25th is so important. The day immediately following the portal carries its own message, and that message is remarkably practical. On June 25th, Venus in Leo forms a trine to Saturn in Aries. I find this transit fascinating because it feels like a bridge between inspiration and implementation. It is as though the universe pauses after the emotional and spiritual intensity of June 24th and asks a simple question. Now that you have seen the direction, what are you going to do with it? Venus governs values, relationships, desires, creativity, and what we choose to nurture. Saturn governs structure, responsibility, discipline, and long-term commitment. When these two planets connect through a supportive trine, there is an opportunity to transform inspiration into something tangible. The emotional recognition experienced during the portal can begin taking physical form. Ideas can become plans, feelings can become choices, vision can become action. This energy encourages people to examine what they discovered and ask themselves how they can create space for it within the reality of everyday life. How can this new awareness be protected? How can it be supported? How can life be organized in a way that allows this emerging direction to grow stronger instead of fading away? Yet even within this supportive energy, there is a note of caution that should not be ignored. On the very same day, another significant aspect unfolds. The Sun forms a square to Neptune. Neptune is a complex influence. Neptune is a complex influence. At its highest expression, it inspires spirituality, imagination, compassion, and connection to something transcendent. At its more challenging expression, it can blur boundaries, distort perception, and encourage people to mistake wishes for fact. Under Neptune's influence, it becomes easier to project hopes onto situations and see what we want to see rather than what is actually present. This does not invalidate the portal experience. Quite the opposite. It simply suggests that discernment remains necessary. Trust the emotional truth revealed by the alignment. Trust the deeper knowing that emerges. Trust the deeper knowing that emerges. Trust the direction itself. But resist the urge to force immediate conclusions about every detail. Allow the vision time to breathe. Allow reality to reveal itself gradually. Not every answer needs to arrive at once. Sometimes clarity strengthens through patience. Sometimes wisdom deepens when given room to settle. This becomes especially important because another major astrological event follows shortly afterward. On June 29th, Mercury stations retrograde in Cancer. This retrograde introduces a period of reflection, review, and emotional re-evaluation. It asks people to revisit what they have learned, to reconsider assumptions, to examine motivations, to ensure that the choices being made are rooted in authentic emotional truth rather than temporary excitement, fear, fantasy, or external pressure. Mercury retrograde often receives a negative reputation, but in this context, it appears to serve a valuable purpose. It creates an opportunity to integrate the lessons of the portal more consciously. Rather than rushing ahead blindly, it encourages a deeper examination of what truly resonates. The portal may open on June 24th, but fully stepping into its possibilities appears to be a process extending throughout the season ahead, and that is not a flaw in the design. It is evidence of how meaningful change actually occurs. Lasting transformation is rarely created through a single emotional high. It is built through repeated choices, thoughtful adjustments, and the gradual incorporation of new awareness into everyday life. Then the story reaches another major turning point. Just 6 days after the Destiny portal, on June 30th, Jupiter leaves Cancer and enters Leo. And if there is one event in this entire sequence that feels like a powerful green light from the cosmos, it may be this one. Jupiter is associated with growth, abundance, opportunity, expansion, optimism, and faith. Wherever Jupiter travels, it tends to amplify the qualities of the sign it occupies. Leo is the sign of creative self-expression, confidence, visibility, courage, and authentic presence. Leo is not content with quietly knowing who it is. Leo wants to embody that truth openly. It wants to live it, share it, express it, celebrate it. When Jupiter enters Leo, the message feels unmistakable. The period of preparation begins transitioning into a period of expression. The focus shifts from discovering purpose to living purpose, from internal recognition to external embodiment. Over the next 12 months, Jupiter's presence in Leo may encourage people to become more visible, more creative, more confident in expressing who they truly are. It invites greater authenticity, greater courage, greater willingness to occupy space without apology. When viewed as a complete sequence, the architecture of these events becomes strikingly clear. On June 19th, Chiron enters Taurus and begins redirecting attention toward healing, self-worth, physical stability, and the relationship with the body. On June the 20th, Uranus in Gemini forms its exact square to the lunar nodes, disrupting outdated structures and breaking attachments to forms of control that can no longer support future growth. On June 24th, the Sun in Cancer forms its trine to the North Node in Pisces, while the Scorpio moon completes the grand water trine, creating a powerful moment of emotional alignment and intuitive recognition. Then Jupiter enters Leo on June 30th, amplifying self-expression and encouraging visible participation in the path that has been revealed. This progression does not feel random, it feels intentional. Healing, disruption, alignment, expansion. Each step appears connected to the next. Each movement prepares the ground for what follows. It resembles a carefully constructed bridge carrying people from an old identity toward a new expression of themselves. And perhaps that is why this moment feels so important, because many of you are standing directly within that sequence right now. Yet beneath all of the astrology, all of the transits, all of the technical details, there is one central message that rises above everything else. The portal opening on June 24th does not ask you to be perfect. It does not ask you to have solved every problem. It does not require complete healing, complete certainty, or complete readiness. What it asks for is trust, nothing more and nothing less. The alignment itself reveals why. The Sun in Cancer, trining the North Node in Pisces, supported by the Moon in Scorpio, creates an environment where emotional intelligence becomes a guide rather than an obstacle. Many people have been taught to distrust their feelings, to suppress them, to manage them, to place logic above intuition at all costs. Yet this configuration suggests something radically different. It suggests that the emotional signals emerging from within may contain valuable information about direction and purpose. The very sensitivity that some people have spent years trying to control may actually be functioning as a navigation system. The feelings you have been told to ignore may be pointing toward exactly what matters most. That realization can feel uncomfortable because it challenges deeply ingrained beliefs. Most people are taught that intuition lacks credibility, that emotions create confusion, that action should only occur after certainty has been achieved. Yet the symbolism of this moment points elsewhere. It suggests that the map may already exist within you. That direction may emerge through resonance rather than analysis, that the next step may become visible through feeling before it becomes visible through logic. If you have sensed that possibility recently, if there has been a subtle awareness beneath the noise of daily life, a quiet pull towards something you cannot fully explain, a feeling that another version of your future is waiting just beyond your current horizon, then this alignment may serve as confirmation. Not because it creates the path, but because it illuminates the path that has been there all along. It is as though the universe reaches across the distance and responds to something your soul has already been whispering. The message feels simple, the feeling is real, the direction is real. Continue moving forward. As we reach the end of this journey through the astrology, I want to express genuine gratitude to everyone who has stayed present through this exploration. These conversations are meaningful because they are not just about planetary movements. They are about the experiences unfolding within real people. If these themes resonated with you, if you have noticed shifts occurring over the past several days, I encourage you to reflect on them. Pay attention to what has changed. Pay attention to what has been revealed. Pay attention to the quiet inner voice that may have grown stronger recently. Most importantly, remember that none of us navigate these transitions entirely alone. We learn through sharing experiences, comparing insights, and witnessing one another's journeys. Take care of yourself in the days ahead. Stay connected to what feels true, and as this remarkable sequence continues unfolding, there will be much more to explore together.